Hey everyone, this is Lomi, and I don't even really know how to catch you up on the absolute whirlwind the last few weeks have been, so I'm just going to start talking and we'll see what happens. So, I recently learned that only like 6% of people keep a car for 15 years, and I also learned the average lifespan of a car is 18 years, so people don't typically drive stuff until it falls apart. And I don't know why I never really considered that, but maybe it's because I really love my car, and I know I've mentioned that before. I got my car when it was 5 years old. The mileage was really high for its age, but it had been really well kept. And I've had it for 14 years now, longer than I've had this channel, which recently celebrated its 10th anniversary. So yay for us. Thank you for being here with me. But yeah, car stuff. Back at the end of January, we had a big ice storm, and halfway through it, we got stuck in this yo-yo cycle of like 50 to 60 degree days, Fahrenheit, because I'm an American, and single digit or even sub-zero nights. And even though I love my car, have babied my car, it is 19 years old, and the extreme temperature changes meant suddenly everything that was original plastic or rubber decided to start cracking all at once. And while I'm not an amazing mechanic or anything like that, I can do a lot of basic stuff at home, changing alternators or hoses or things like that. But because sports cars ride kind of low, I can't get the floor jack under my car, and I don't have low profile ramps or a place to even use them since our garage ceiling is low and our driveway is a steep hill, so I couldn't get under the car to replace all the radiator hoses and stuff that had broken and dumped all of my coolant into the street, and I had to take it into a shop. During all of this, I took a look at my book stats. If you don't know, I am an author of like 30 fantasy books. Most of the doll projects I share on this channel are related to creating the characters from those books, and while I made the switch a couple years ago from spending most of my time doing creative tutorials here on YouTube to spending full-time hours working as an author, it's unfortunately not a super lucrative field for most writers, so I don't make full-time money. But I have established a certain baseline for my average monthly income, comparable to a part-time job, but doing something I love a whole lot more, so it's good enough for our needs most of the time. When I looked at my numbers in February, though, it was my lowest earning month in 3 years, and unless I changed something, it was going to be hard to pay for car repairs. So I decided to put aside my work on doll projects and writing new books for a bit, and redouble my efforts marketing to see if I could pull my sales numbers up again. And I also started going through a lot of doll projects with a critical eye to see what I realistically won't get around to doing, because that would let me sell off things like wigs and shoes that'll never get used, and maybe some dolls I won't actually get around to customizing too. Part of the book sales problem was that a huge part of my income comes from Kindle Unlimited. But since I had just finished running the second Kickstarter campaign to relaunch a book with a pretty hardcover edition, the first 2 books in my top-selling series temporarily weren't in KU, so I could offer them with the campaign. The campaign did good, but it takes a minimum of 2 weeks after it concludes to get the funds, and I couldn't put the books back into KU until I got the payout and completed ebook fulfillment, or else I would be violating the exclusivity terms in the Kindle Unlimited terms of service. I switched to marketing my other books, mostly focusing on the ones I knew typically do well in any given month, and I was just going to coast with my donkey books. That's a term that comes from the author Elena Johnson, who describes books as sometimes you release a book that's a racehorse. It takes off and brings you great rewards, and sometimes you get a donkey. So I was pushing my books pretty hard, and my income started to come back up pretty quickly. Then, on a whim, I decided to spend a morning making a reel I had an idea for, even though it showcased one of my donkey books that didn't launch well and has never done well. Just 11 seconds to describe one of the many sources of inspiration for the book, and without a thought, I posted it, completely forgetting that the day I posted was the 40th anniversary of The Legend of Zelda. That reel exploded. Suddenly I was spending 4 hours a day replying to comments and DMs. When I wasn't replying to comments, I was signing, packing, and shipping books. I had a full bookcase of books in the series that I had ordered when it released, and I never sold more than a handful at events. But suddenly my little direct shop was selling out. I couldn't get new books in fast enough to meet demand. And what should have been a dream come true moment for any author ended up being terrible, because keeping up with it was an enormous amount of pressure that couldn't have come at a worse time. It wasn't just that while I was struggling to keep up with it, I was in and out of my garage fixing my car that broke down bad 5 times in the span of 5 weeks. It was also that my elderly kitty Noodle became suddenly sick, and I knew we were at the end of her life. And I was having to still hold it together while I was on the phone with dozens of car salesmen trying to get them to take me seriously while I was shopping for a new car, because we didn't know which breakdown was going to be the one we couldn't fix. So what should have been a moment of career-defining joy was overlaid with tons of stress and intense grief, because it felt like the moment something good was finally happening, I was losing other pieces of my life that meant so much. Rosie had been my dream car. I got her on the heels of a deep personal tragedy, in a moment where I thought I'd never be able to reach my dreams. I'd wanted a Mustang since I was 6 years old. It had been my favorite car since I was a child, and while kid me always wanted a GT, adult me was over the moon to have one at all, and I was perfectly happy with the V6 I ended up with, as evidenced by keeping it for so long. But now I was losing that dream car, and I was losing my cat, who had been my friend and companion for 15 years. And my husband was so wonderful and encouraging and supportive through everything, helping me get packages to the post office, adjusting his hours at work so I could drop him off and pick him up so I would have his car during the day to do all the typical family tasks that come from being a parent. He told me I could buy any car I wanted, but the budget decides that more than taste or dreams, and I spent hours scouring automotive listings to find the car that would be a huge part of my life for the next 15 years. Because when you're someone who likes cars, even casually, what you drive can feel like an extension of yourself and your identity as much as the clothes you wear. Then I stumbled across a car that showed as part of a dealer's inventory, but it had no pictures and no information. It was a blue Mustang at a dealership an hour and a half away, listed within our budget, and I'd found it within hours of them accepting it as a trade-in. We dropped off a huge bag of books at the post office and then headed out to see it. The color was nostalgic for me, similar to my first car, and it was loaded. Leather seats, every feature you could imagine. It had low miles, and it was a GT, so for the first time in my life, I finally got to drive what 6-year-old me always dreamed of. It should have been perfect. But I went over that car with a fine-tooth comb, and I found problems the dealer wouldn't fix. And they wouldn't take the price down anymore to make up for them. I had only ever hoped to have 2 things in life, to be able to write all my stories and to drive a Mustang. But when I looked at my husband, who knew how much it meant to me, I said, I love it, but this isn't a good car. It looks like everything I want, but it's not the one. So I got out of that dream car and I went home. I said goodbye to my cat and packed the last book on my shelf. Comments were coming slower now. With everything else going on, I hadn't been able to keep up, so I lost all the momentum that should have changed the course of my author career. I had brought in enough to pay for some of the repairs for Rosie, but more than anything, I felt like my moment had finally come and I'd missed it. I didn't have the energy to try to catch lightning again. I fell off from all the book promotion and didn't have any motivation to work on any creative projects at all. After 6 hard weeks, I was just completely exhausted, and it felt like everything I'd spent ages fighting for had fallen apart in slow motion. I got a lot of hugs from my family, and they told me to keep going because things would have to turn around at some point. Book sales faded again since I couldn't push with the same marketing strength, but campaign funds arrived, and I ordered everything I needed to start shipping books for that project. I worked on some new patterns for doll projects that I want to tackle soon, and I started making plans for what I always thought was a donkey book, which had proven it could be a racehorse if I could figure out how to get it in front of the right people. I had wanted to do a relaunch for this series at the end of this year, and maybe that's still a good idea, especially since now it'll be relaunching with more social proof. Spring got here, it turned sunny again, and I was sitting outside trying to figure out how to get back on track when I got a text message from a car dealership 2 hours away. It said, "Call me." Now we gotta get those books taken care of.